Chris, if I get called away, I'll come back to the phone, okay?
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Safranek.
So, yeah. Okay.
I hope you don't get called away for the sake of the health of the patients. Yeah. But if you do get called away, there's something cool about that for the students that are interested.
Okay.
Right. Welcome, everyone. I'll give us just a couple of minutes for people to get going. So I like to ask whatever random question comes into my mind. So it's 65 degrees and sunny in Southern California right now. Does anyone have snow? Does anyone else have snow?
We do have snow here in the Midwest.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So that's Nebraska for you, Dr.
Nebraska and Iowa both have got some. Yeah, awesome. It's unusual this early, but it's here. Yeah. So
we got a little bit yesterday. It was just like a tiny bit, like it didn't stick, but it was exciting.
So Pennsylvania, nice.
Yeah, I know.
One of my good friends, my good priest friends in Michigan, just sent me a picture. I think they got 14 inches in 24 hours, something like that.
Buffalo, I don't know if you saw, I was going to get just destroyed.
They moved the football game to Detroit, the Buffalo Bills game, because they just thought I don't know that people are going to be able to make it to the stadium.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. All right, awesome. Well, let's get started. We've got a good amount of people here. Welcome, everybody. As see, John Paul, that's how it is for us here too. Well, I'm so excited to be joined by an excellent group of panelists today for our, let's see, just want to make sure. Actually, I am going to record this too. Oh, no, it is recording. Good, awesome. So we are going to be talking about science and health today. It'll be a bit broad, but we have people from every avenue that we could possibly want to discuss. First, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Katy Hansen. She's right there in the middle. Katy has her bachelor's in biology from Southwest Minnesota State University, her master's in botany from North Dakota State University. She is active with the St. Philomena Mother-Daughter Retreat Ministry and the Femina Fide Ministry. This is where I need to practice my Latin more. I just went up to TAC for Mass yesterday. I was like, it's been a little bit. I need to practice my Latin more. She's also an adjunct biology instructor at Mesa Community College in Arizona, and also Bismarck State College in North Dakota for the past 20 years, over 20 years. She also teaches for her local homeschool group, natural science, biology, and chemistry. And she has been an MODG teacher for the last 10 years. And in her words, most importantly, she has been a homeschooling mom for 19 years, has 3 MODG graduates, and I think there's a 4th on the way. Is that right, Mrs. Hansen? Awesome. Just a couple of years. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. We also are joined by Kaleigh Hultine. She is MODG class of 2012. She has majored in environmental science with a minor in chemistry from Westfield State University. She worked for waste management, which is something that I'm really fascinated by. I've got some questions for you later on. And she is now a stay-at-home mom and doing her dream job of teaching for MODG. I love that. Now we are joined by Rachel Montanaro, who is actually Mrs. Berquist's daughter. Wait, youngest daughter? Is that right, Rachel? Yes, the youngest daughter. She is MODG class of 2000, as she has her bachelor's from Thomas Aquinas College and has her bachelor's in nursing from the accelerated nursing program with the St. Louis University. She has worked as a pediatric RN, got her master's in nursing from CUA, Catholic University of America, and worked as a pediatric nurse practitioner in acute and primary care in a hospital. She has been an MODG teacher for 7 years and done volunteer work for Catholic Charities, teaching pregnancy and newborn care classes to expectant mothers, and is also a homeschooling mother. We are also joined by Olivia McCarthy. She is the MODG class of 2016, has her bachelor's in nursing from Franciscan University in Steubenville, and has worked as an ENT neurology oncology nurse, and now teaches for MODG as well. As a cancer survivor, I'm very grateful for your line of work. And last, but certainly not least, we are joined by Dr. John Safranek, straight from the emergency room. He's in his scrubs today, so he may be called away, but we are so grateful for you joining us, Dr. Safranek. He is an MD and a PhD. He also is an MODG dad, 3 graduates, and 1 in just a couple of years, I think. Dr. Safranek graduated from the University of Nebraska College of Medicine and also received his PhD in philosophy from the Catholic University of America. He has also written in publications ranging from the Hastings Center Report, the Texas Review of Law and Politics, and the University of Colorado Law Review. And he is an emergency room physician at Columbia Community Hospital in Nebraska. Well, thank you all so much. And I'm going to toss it over to Susanna Cope, our NHS chapter secretary, to take us away. Thank you, Susanna.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you all so much for joining us today. To start us off, Mrs. Hansen, could you tell us a little bit about what led you to major in biology?
Yes, I will. It goes back to 7th grade when I was in a science class and we had to dissect frogs, and I thought it would be really gross. So I said, I'm going to partner with a brave hockey player student. His name was Bernie, and he was too afraid to dissect. So I had to do it. And I thought, this is really interesting. So I remember vividly that moment. And then when I went into college, I was going to be an English major or a biology major. And my English professor said, well, if you like science, go into science. There's a lot more opportunities for a woman in the science world. And so I took his advice and I did. And then I wanted to just keep going to school. I honestly didn't want to have to graduate, and I liked going to school. So I went right and got my master's. And that led to opportunities working at the community college and to be a stay-at-home mom while I dabbled on the side with what I really enjoyed doing, and that's teaching. So that's how I got into it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hultine, why did you decide to major in environmental science, and what led you to minor in chemistry as well?
Well, environmental science has always been a subject that I absolutely loved. Everything science related always interested me, but it was a little difficult. I remember going through high school chemistry and thinking, oh man, this is rough. I didn't love it while I was going through high school. And so I kind of fell into a minor in chemistry by accident. I had a professor in college that I really loved. And she really just encouraged us, and she was just absolutely wonderful. And I don't know, I found it really fascinating, and that's how I decided to get a minor in chemistry. But as far as environmental science goes, I really enjoyed being outside. The outside world just really fascinated me. And so that's why I chose to pursue an education in environmental science.
That's so great. Thank you so much. Teachers really do make all the difference. Mrs. McCarthy, could you tell us a little bit about what led you to the field of nursing? And as a Maj alumnus, how was the transition from Maj into college?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a question I feel like I get a lot as a nurse. Is like, why did you go into it? And to be honest, I never really thought about it until my youngest brother was diagnosed with cancer, and he was in oncology wing for about 2 years undergoing different treatments. And I was really touched, even just as the sibling of a patient, how much the nurses made a difference in my life. And I really wanted to do that for my patients and their families. So yeah, so I decided to go into nursing because of my experience. Yeah, walking alongside my brother who had cancer, and just the wonderful work that the nurses and the doctors did in like saving his life, really. And yeah, so that's really what led me to go into nursing. And then my transition actually was really, really smooth into college. And I really do credit that to Mother of Divine Grace, because I feel like what I learned through Mother of Divine Grace is just a love of learning. And if you love to learn, then you can learn anything. And then another thing too that I found was different for me than my peers who had just gone to a public school was that I was really good at managing my own time, because I had done that throughout high school. So when I got to college, I was really good at, getting things done that needed to be done and managing my time well. So I think all of the students that are watching that are Mother Divine Grace students right now, I think your transition to college is going to be really, really great, because you already have to have so much self-discipline in high school, which will serve you greatly once you move into college.
Thank you so much. That's really beautiful about why you want to be a nurse. And it's very reassuring to all the seniors who are getting ready to go off to college. So thank you. Mrs. Montanaro, what made you decide to become a nurse after going to TAC, and what was your experience in an accelerated nursing program?
Yeah, so when I started college, I didn't plan on going into nursing. I'd liked anatomy in high school, but it just wasn't, I don't have nurses. I had an aunt who was a nurse, but it's not a big thing in my family, and I never had anyone in my family be very seriously ill. But when I hit my senior year at TAC, I was trying to figure out what to do next, and some of my friends were considering nursing. So at that point, I really stepped back and I thought about it, and I thought, well, I'm really interested in the more like the academic side of it and the human body. I would enjoy learning more about that. And then I was really drawn, as Olivia's talking about, I knew that nurses can make a huge difference, that they're there in the hospital. I mean, if you're thinking about acute care nursing, they're there really most of the time with the patient. So they're they do most of the treatments, they do most of the teaching, they're there to support the family. So I thought, well, here's a career where there's service. So most of my time is not just I'm making money, which is not a bad, it's not a bad thing to just make money so you can support yourself, but I'm both making money and I'm serving others, for the hours that I'm at work. So that was appealing. And I found that to be the case. But at that point, though, I hadn't planned ahead. And so I knew there were accelerated nursing programs, and I decided to go that route. That was 15 years ago. So there weren't as many. Now there are hundreds of them. You guys could find them anywhere, but there weren't as many. And so I wanted a Catholic one, so I'd have some level of protection. And SLU was one of the first in the country. They had a really good pass rate for the NCLEX, so I chose that one. I took a few prerequisites and then dove in. It was a very intense program. It was 12 months. The first day, everyone is introducing themselves and talking about their backgrounds, and everyone was like an EMT or a biology major, or they'd been nurses' aides forever. And I'm thinking, I'm like liberal arts. I was like the only liberal arts degree person there. So I was a little nervous, but it didn't turn out to be a problem at all. In fact, since it's all about critical thinking, their tests are like, you have a patient in this situation. Here are, 4 options. These are the things that you could do. And 3 of them will be very reasonable things to do for the patient. And you have to figure out which is the best one, which is the thing I should do first. So there's a lot of critical thinking involved. And so I think my education both at Maj and TAC really was an asset. So it was intense, but it was very doable. And then before I graduated, I had a job. And so that transition was, it was good. There's no looking around.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Thank you so much. And it's really interesting about how the liberal arts background really helped you with that as well, for anybody who's considering that. So thank you. Dr. Safranek, what led you to become a doctor, and what was your experience like in med school? Oh, I believe you're still muted. Sorry.
Okay. I think the idea of being able to help people, to make a living helping people seemed to me like a pretty amazing thing. It combined lots of things that I appreciate, such as, there's a high level of critical thinking, and a lot of just interpersonal things. You enter into people's lives when they're really vulnerable. That appealed to me. Just being able to help them, get them through the tough stretch, whatever it is that they were going through. Now, I do think that med school is, I call it intellectual boot camp. I come from a liberal arts background. I majored in philosophy and theology in college. And so I found medical school, and maybe Rachel would say the same thing. It's just a totally different way of thinking, and it's just kind of grunt work. It definitely was not as enjoyable to me as the liberal arts were, but you're able to get through it.
No, thank you so much. It's really good to know. All right, going back to Mrs. Hansen, what is your favorite thing about the jobs you have done with your degrees, and what sort of jobs are open to those who major in biology? I know you mentioned that a little bit earlier.
Oh, great. Well, what I like about this career that I have, I knew I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. Having this skill set has allowed me to work part-time. When I first started homeschooling, back in the old days, when I first started having children, I just taught a night class at the community college. With a master's degree, I was able to do that and be gone 2 nights a week and stay in my field. And then when I started homeschooling, that's when online classes were really first invented. So I taught one of the first online classes at the community college, and I had 3 kids at the time. And once a week I'd go to campus with my kids in a stroller and pick up work that the students mailed in. So now it's changed tremendously, as we all know. And I still teach a lot of online classes and transitioning it back into in person. But just having that skill set as a mom and a wife, and to be able to work part-time, has been really, really a great blessing to our family. And I just like that as we share science with my students, that it really leads to ultimate truth, that our science and faith go together hand in hand. And I can talk about my Catholic faith in this context, and how God reveals himself to us through the natural world until we can see him face to face in heaven someday. He reveals himself into so many ways. So I like that aspect of what I do, and just teaching about science. And hopefully there's so many people in kind of the question box, there's so many careers associated with it that we don't even know. So if you go in as a general biology major, you can dabble in microbiology or genetics, and hopefully find something that's really interesting to you. And then if you choose to go to grad school, focus on something that's even more interesting to you, because we just don't know, in high school or even in college, what's out there. And you just have to kind of experience it and explore this great world that has a lot of opportunities.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Mrs. Hultine, could you tell us a little bit about the different jobs you have done as well with waste management or with MODGE? And then just what sort of jobs are open to those who major in environmental science or chemistry?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started working at Waste Management, that was back in 2017 when I was graduating college. And I thought that I was going to have a lot of important duties, such as overseeing the company's carbon footprint and making sure that they were complying with different environmental regulations. And as it turns out, it was completely the opposite of that. I was in a cubicle for most of the day, and I really didn't like that, right? Because the reason why I chose environmental science was so that I could be outside. Sorry to everyone who's had classes with me. You guys already know Bradley and Cole. They always join me. But there's a lot of different jobs that you can have in environmental science, like Mrs. Hansen was saying. Similar to biology, you could become an environmental engineer, which they collect samples and they analyze those samples. So there's a lot of outside work as well as some lab work, which is pretty cool. Agricultural scientists, they help to mitigate contaminants like air and soil contaminants. There's forestry work. You could do work in, sorry, we're also dealing with a cold too. And fisheries as well. You could be an environmental chemist or a marine and wildlife biologist. So there's a lot of different jobs that you could do depending on if you want to work outside or in a lab or kind of a hybrid of both. And I was really blessed because I knew that I ultimately wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And I also wanted to share my love of science, though. So this is why Mother of Divine Grace has been a huge blessing to me and my family. And I've been able to have my dream job of being a stay-at-home mom and share my love of science.
That is so awesome. Thank you so much. Let's see. To kind of jump back to nursing, Mrs. McCarthy, what was your experience like being an ENT, neurology, and oncology nurse? What was like maybe the hardest thing about it or most rewarding thing about it?
Yeah, so actually, when I graduated in 2020, so when I started working as an ENT, neurology, and oncology nurse, we were in the midst of the pandemic, and that made, I think, my job even more difficult. There were a lot of, I think the job would have been difficult anyway, but my hospital that I was working at in Baltimore had a very strict no visitors rule. So I had very, very, very sick patients. Often they were dying and they had no family, no friends. And so that was really, really difficult. I did love it. So I worked with, so ENT is ears, nose, and throat. So most of my patients, it was definitely a rough demographic. Most of them had severe cancers of the head, neck, throat, and they would have very, very intense surgeries. Oftentimes their tongue would be removed and they would never speak again. Or they had trachs placed. So they couldn't communicate. So they would go into the surgery and they would have their jaw removed, their teeth removed, their tongue removed, trachs placed. They had to use feeding tubes. So these were very intense surgeries. And my patients would wake up and, they would never be able to speak again. And so they would have to learn how to communicate via whiteboard. And that was just with me, communicating. And that's a huge loss. So my patients often then suffered from a lot of depression and then mental health issues is on top of that. That was really, really difficult, but I also loved it because my patients were in the hospital. I had them for usually weeks to months. So I got to build a relationship with them and I loved that aspect. I loved getting to know them and also just watching them heal and watching them learn how to self-suction their trachs and learn to take care of themselves, learn to give their own tube feedings. So they would have a G tube and they would put, basically like a formula down through their G tube and just teaching them that. I loved that. I loved when they got to go home. That was, the best part of my job. I loved giving them discharge instructions and wheeling them down, and giving them a hug goodbye. I loved that. But yeah, it was definitely a difficult demographic and also just a difficult time period because of the pandemic. And yeah, another thing, because of the pandemic, I think there were an increase in mental health issues in general. So a lot of my patients had mental health issues, and that because nurses are really at the bedside at all times. My shift was from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then there would be another nurse from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. We really deal with the brunt of those mental health issues. And so that was really difficult. I'm trying to think of like a highlight. I would say the best part about being a nurse, though, is just the privilege of getting to know your patient and serving them. I loved that. And I loved watching them heal. So yeah, that's what I would say my experience was. I will say that I'm teaching for Mother Divine Grace now. I'm teaching anatomy, physiology, and an algebra class, and I love teaching. I would eventually want to go back into nursing at some point, but now I have a daughter, and so I get to stay home and teach, and I love being able to do that. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing about your experience. I know it's like everyone's saying in the chat box, like I'm sure you made such a difference to them. I'm sure it makes such a difference to have like good nurses in situations.
Yeah, it makes such a big difference to have a good nurse. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you.
You. Mrs. Montanaro, what was your experience as a nurse like, being a pediatric RN and then a nurse practitioner as well?
I loved it too. I love nursing. I knew when I started that I wanted to work in pediatrics, and I never wavered in that. So I worked as a pediatric RN at a community hospital for 3 years. So that meant that I was at a general peds floor, which meant that I saw everything. So we would have oncology patients, but we'd also have, ortho patients or people coming in with RSV. I saw the whole gamut. So it was a great way to start and get to know what are the areas you could further specialize in. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. There are hard cases, but when you're doing more of a general floor, it's balanced out. You see a lot of people come in and go out quickly, and then you have the patients that stay for a long time. A lot of fun, but I knew that I probably wanted to go on and get my master's at some point. I do love nursing, bedside nursing. I love being there all day and really getting to know the patients. The added bonus of being a nurse practitioner is you get a little bit more of a say in how they're treated. So you get to make some more treatment decisions for the patients. So you're almost always, especially in a hospital, you are working with an attending physician, but you get to determine some of the care and not just be carrying it out. So, and I like school too. I could continue school for a long time. So there are many reasons to go back to school for me, but I chose Catholic University because they had an acute and primary care. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do primary care or acute care after I finished. So that one program would qualify me to take both exams. And then after I finished, I thought I was going to do oncology, which had always been a favorite of mine. And I want to bring this up actually, because for anyone considering this field, there are things you have to think about. I almost took a job at St. Louis Children's in their oncology team. It seemed like a really great place to work, but I knew that the director there had told me she needed someone to specialize in the care of their sickle cell patients. That's a hematology disorder. I like that. I would like to work with them. But one of the protocol aspects for the adolescents there is contraceptives. They all have to be on contraceptives, and it's because their maintenance treatment is very teratogenic. It's bad for if you're pregnant, it would be very, it could cause deformities in the baby. So that was something I had to think about, because I could care for a patient maybe who was on it, but if I'm the one who's supposed to be prescribing that and it is as birth control, as a Catholic, I couldn't do that. So you have to think about the field you're going into and what you might, be asked to do. So right before, I was kind of weighing whether I should take this job or not. And then I got an offer for pediatric transplant position at Georgetown out in DC. So I took that one. And I had been out there for school. I knew people, it made sense. But that was a pretty intense job. It was a pediatric liver and intestinal transplant. Intestinal transplant's very difficult. Not many places do that. And you work with these patients for a long time. They're very sick. But that was fascinating, and it gave me a lot of the experiences I had liked about oncology, where you work with this family, you get them through this crisis, you hopefully get to see them on the other side. You do a lot of teaching and really have a relationship with this person long term, because they have to keep following up forever. And then I got married. The hours were really, really long. So I switched to surgery, general surgery at Children's National. And I want to say once again, there were no problems when I was there, no ethical issues. But I know now that the very surgery team I worked with, they have done like gender reassignment, surgeries. And so that would once again be something you have to think about. So I did that until I had my first child. And then I decided to stay home because the hours were very, very, very long. But I loved it all. And hopefully we'll go back sometime.
Thank you so much for sharing about your experience and for sharing about all of that too. It's definitely something for us to consider and pray about. So thank you. All right, going back to Dr. Safranek, could you just tell us a little bit more about what it is like to be a doctor? And then how does your doctorate in philosophy and your theology and philosophy background play a role in the way that you take care of your patients?
In terms of how the theology and philosophy, I think more than anything, and I think maybe the other panelists would agree with this. It's it does affect my activities in a few small ways. I've gotten into discussions with patients about the morning after pill and these sorts of things. So it's come in very handy in those situations. But I think like most things in life and probably most occupations, you know, the religious aspect is going to come from your spiritual life and not so much from what I've learned. I should say this, the philosophy has helped me in many ways. I mean, I guess to organize my thoughts and to try to be very consistent in my thinking. And so the philosophy has helped in that regard. But again, in terms of the, theology, it's more of the spiritual life, and really, doing what Mother Teresa said of trying to see Christ in all these people that you're dealing with, especially the patients, but even your co-workers. And so, it's one of those things of knowledge isn't virtue, and so I think the religious aspect and even the philosophical to some extent, the most important thing that I can do is to maintain a good spiritual life and work on that. And then if I do that, I will be treating patients like I should be treating them. So, in terms of the philosophy and theology, I've written on these things, to some extent. So I've contributed in that way. And again, I just think that philosophy in general, helps your thought processes. And so I think that's helped me in medicine. It's helped me in interacting with colleagues. It's helped me interact with patients, in terms of that sort of organization. So I think that's kind of how the philosophy and theology fit in. But again, I think that just the Catholic faith in general is the most important thing. And, keeping a healthy spiritual life and trying to keep these things foremost in your mind on a daily basis is probably the best thing I can do, in terms of interacting with my patients. What was your first question, Susanna?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's really eye-opening and definitely something to really keep in mind for those of us who are trying to pursue careers in that. My first part of the question was just what is it like being a doctor? What has your experience been?
Oh,
sort of patients do you take care of?
I love what I do. I'm an emergency room doctor. And so the fun thing about this is I get to see everything, So I saw somebody today who bruised their ribs. I might see a 3-year-old who's got a cold. I may see a pregnant patient the next day, a 98-year-old after her, a 1-month-old. I mean, you get all things. And so it's fun for me just because I have no idea what's going to come in, and so I found that when I was in a clinic and I had, and there were, this more as a student, I had, there were 40 patients that were coming in, and you saw what they all were. They were all small things, and it was just very routine. And I think that's one of the things I like about the emergency room is that it's not routine at all. You have no idea what's coming in. And it kind of keeps you on your toes. And, you have to know a little, as we say, about a lot of things. And so I enjoy that. The other fun thing is that, at least for me in the emergency room, you pick up skills that you actually use out in what I would call the real world. So before I came to work, there was a neighbor, a 10-year-old girl had a sliver under her fingernail, just little things like that, or little, cuts that need to be stitched or whatever, that I can help friends and their kids deal with these things. So that's the fun thing. That's the fun thing about the emergency room in general. But again, I just think with medicine, you get to interact with people at a vulnerable point in their lives. And, it's different if somebody's coming in and you're working in a store and they're buying something. It's just a much different interaction. I think the people here on the panel will agree. You see people really for what they are, and you really see their personalities. At least in the emergency room, the masks are all off, the guard is down, and you just interact with them in a very real way and in a very significant way. And so you have a almost instant relationship with them, you know, where you again get to see them for what they are and interact with them at a very, very deep level. And so I enjoy that. You know, it also you know, because of the relationship, you know, as a doctor, I can get away with, you know, quite a bit. And so, you know, it allows me to bring faith into the experience as much as I can, you know, in terms of either just telling everybody that I'll pray for them or even praying with some patients, you know. So, and I just think medicine, you know, and healthcare in general allows you to do that. I think that's one of the real beautiful things where I feel that I can witness with every patient. And not that you can't do that in other occupations, and you should, because everybody's called to sanctity. But with medicine, it just allows you to do it at a much deeper level. And I think I really enjoy that.
That is really beautiful. Thank you so much. It's so cool to hear about, like, what a great way of evangelization that is too. Thank you. All right, just one more round of questions before we get to the Q&A pod. But Mrs. Hansen, what are some tips you would give to those who want to major in biology and then pursue a career afterward?
Well, like some of the other people have said, it's not easy. It's not an easy major. So you have to go in with your eyes wide open. I went in as a biology major, and my first test, I had a D, and I received a D, and I never had seen a D in my entire life. And I thought, how can I keep doing this? So I had to learn better study habits. You know, there's just so much time spent in lab work and coursework that it's not for the faint of heart, but yet it's rewarding. And I think it was one of the ladies, Kaleigh, said how, you know, it just takes one really great professor to make it manageable and doable. So if you have a heart for this, even though it's frightening, just be brave and do it. And know that every class you take, you might not love, but there's going to be something that's important. And it might just open your eyes to a new discipline within this scientific world. I think a general biology degree is wonderful because you're going to take every course. You're going to dabble in a little, you're going to know a lot about a little, you know, little about a lot of things. And then hopefully you can specialize and find some career. I think I put in the chat box that my daughter's a water economist, and she went in as a biology or a business major and took an economics course and called, and she said, "Mom, I just love economics. I can't believe I love it so much." I'm like, that's really nerdy and really wonderful at the same time. And then she got into this really niche field of dealing with hydrology and water usage. We live in the desert, and where do we get our water from? So I like to think she has a little bit of science associated with her job, but you just don't know what's out there. Some people have asked, what are the careers? There's so many, but you have to just jump in with an open heart, and hopefully you'll find something and pray, and God will lead you to what he's calling you to do, and how we can best serve our community and our faith with this love of science or math or whatever you're being called to do. So just do it and take classes and try a lot of different things, because you just don't know what's out there, because there's a lot out there.
Thank you so much. That's really great advice.
Yeah.
All right, Mrs. Hultine, how about you? Do you have any advice for those who want to major in environmental science or chemistry?
Yeah, so going off of what Mrs. Hansen was saying, take good notes. I was, my first biology class that I took as a freshman, I failed my first test. And I said to myself, okay, science obviously is not going to work out for me. You know, I have to figure something out. And I felt like I had to figure it out really quick, because I was, you know, I was a freshman. I only had 4 years of school. And as it turned out, it was just my studying habits that needed a little bit of fine tuning. And you'll find also, as you take more and more courses in college, depending on your professor and how they teach, you're going to need to fine tune your studying habits for all of your classes and kind of adapt to how your professor teaches. And so I learned that. I learned that the hard way, that first test. But I went to talk to one of my professors after I failed that test, and she said, well, you said that you love science, so why would you give up on it? Just keep at it. And she sat down with me and she helped me to write flashcards, and she kind of helped me take notes. She showed me a better method to take notes, and I followed that through my entire college career, and I turned out just fine. And that's not to say that after that biology class, there were some other classes that were really difficult for me. And there were a lot of times where I had to meet privately with my professors to just kind of talk about some of the concepts that I didn't understand. Yeah, but through doing that, they really encouraged me to just stick with that and to pursue what I loved, which was science.
Thank you so much. Those are definitely great tips. And as everyone's saying in the chat box, everyone's even taking notes right now on everyone's advice. So thank you for that. Going back to the medical field, Mrs. McCarthy, do you have any advice for those who want to be a nurse, whether that's advice for the college courses itself, or just the types of nursing you did, or for nursing in general?
Yeah, so similar to, I think, Mrs. Hansen and Mrs. Hultine, I remember I was taking anatomy physiology my freshman year, and I didn't really study for the first quiz because I thought, I could just go off of what we had done in class, and I failed that test. And I was like, oh my goodness. The way my nursing program worked is the first year you do a bunch of prereqs. You do anatomy, physiology lab, organic chemistry lab. I'm trying to think of other classes, pathophysiology, and you have to keep up, like psych of human development, things like that. And you have to keep your GPA has to be a 3.0 if you want to make it into the nursing program, which would start the next year, so your sophomore year. And I think we started off with I think there were 160 pre-nursing majors, and they would only accept like 60 or something. So a lot of people didn't make it. So anyway, I was really stressed after that, my first failed test, and I was like, oh my goodness. So I really had to take notes. I had to study. And one thing that I think is even valuable right now while you're still in high school is just figuring out how you best learn. So for me, this might sound really silly, but so for a lot of the classes, especially anatomy, physiology lab, you have to memorize every single bone in the body, every vein, there's a lot. And you dissect a cat, and your test is literally to label every single part of the cat. And yes, like one thing that was really helpful for me was I knew that I memorized best while walking. So I would pace up and down my college dorm, just, going over all the bones and muscles and veins and stuff. So just knowing how you best learn. Another thing is I learn best by writing down. I can't just listen to material. I have to write it down. So it's good to know that about yourself. How do you best study? And that's going to really aid you in all of your classes. And nursing classes are really, really difficult. Pre-nursing classes are really difficult because it's very science heavy in the sense that it's organic chemistry and that kind of a thing. Also, I would definitely recommend, I don't know if all schools do this, but I had a tutor for every single one of my classes. My school offered them for free, so you could just sign up with a tutor, and it was usually a senior nursing student that would meet with you every week. And so I don't be too proud to get a tutor, even if you feel like you don't need it at first. If nothing else, they're there to help you, and then you can develop a friendship with them. So I would recommend that. And then I'm trying to think of other things I would write. There are so many things I would recommend. Always ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And that translates back into your when you become a nurse on the floor. It's really important that you're critically thinking about every single thing you're doing, because you need to question why you're doing what you're doing. And I think that can be a good definition of critical thinking about what you're actively doing. Because there have been plenty of times, just as a nurse, that I had a doctor's order and I just thought, this doesn't look right. Once I would call the doctor and be like, this doesn't seem like, this is the right medication for this patient, for whatever reason. And the doctor, sure enough, would say, yeah, that was not that. Please don't give that medication, So really important to ask questions in nursing school. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to go to office hours with your professors and clarify. And yeah, even if you think it's a stupid question, it's probably not. It's probably not a stupid question. Yeah, so ask questions. And then as a nurse, ask questions, even just of yourself. Why am I doing this? What is this doing for my patient? How, how's this going to help my patient? And also as a nurse, there's a very high burnout rate, very high. I would probably say in the medical field, there's a very high burnout rate. So really recommend, I know this is probably, 4 years down the line, if you guys end up going into nursing next year, this is like 4 or 5 years from now, but really self-care is really important. And I like to journal, and so just like journaling about my day. And so yeah, so self-care is really important as well. So yeah, those would just be my 2 cents, I think.
Thank you so much. That is really, really helpful. Let's see. Mrs. Montanaro, do you have anything to add on to that for prospective nurses?
Yeah, well, I don't want to cover any more study tips. I think the very good advice and study tips, burnout. I guess just as far as tips when you're thinking about, for students who are thinking ahead, maybe they're not sure. I think it's great that Olivia did. She went directly into nursing. So for anyone who's really very sure, right, and you could go to Franciscan, go to Ave Maria. I know they're all competitive, but you could just do that route. Or maybe you're kind of interested, but you're not sure, and you have an opportunity to go somewhere like I did, liberal arts, TAC or Wyoming Catholic or something like Christendom. I think that can work very well. It worked very well for me. I got a wonderful education. I would definitely do it again. I would go to TAC again. I would plan ahead a little bit and do some of my prerequisites over the summers, but it's doable. So I would say, if you're not sure and you just want to get a really good education, go for it, because you haven't shut off the possibility. I would recommend that you do try to get those prerequisites done. Like I said, you could do it over the summer. I know my husband teaches at Christendom, their graduate school. So I'm in the area and I talk to the people there, and they've had so many of their graduates go into nursing that they decided they wanted to offer some of those prerequisites just there, so that these students didn't have to struggle to find them. So now they have anatomy and physiology, and I think statistics and chemistry and things like that, so that you could go there, get your degree, and then do an accelerated nursing program afterwards. For the accelerated nursing program, it was very full-time. That was a year of my life where I did nothing but nursing. And it's nursing school. And I mean, but then it was done. Anyway, so I just wanted to tell you that. I think burnout rate is extremely high right now, and the pandemic's made things 10 times worse. There's a huge nursing shortage. So you would find a job very easily, but it might not be a job you loved. So I would say that you have to keep in mind, with nursing anyway, there's a lot of flexibility. So you could start somewhere and do it for a year or two. If you hate it, there are other options. So look around. This is a career where you could be in different areas. You could do geriatrics, you could do pediatrics, you could specialize, you could do allergy, you could do telehealth. I mean, they're, like full-time, part-time. You don't have to think, because I don't love my first nursing job, that this is not for me. You can find something else. No.
Thank you so much. That's really, really helpful too. That's something that's so nice about the medical and science field, is there's so many options like within each major that you do. So thank you. Let's see. And then last but not least, Dr. Safranek, what is some advice you would give to those who hope to be a doctor?
Study hard. I'm going to say something that is goes against the grain here a little bit, because it's the background I came from. And I would say this: if you if you love the sciences, and like most of our panelists here do, then you can go ahead and this advice wouldn't apply to you. But if you have a strength in the liberal arts, my advice would be for students. The hard thing about medical school, first of all, is to get into it, and so to be accepted. And so, if you want, you've prayed and you've discerned and you decide that's what God's calling you to do, and you want to get into medical school. One big piece of advice I would give is, wherever you go to school, if you have to choose a major, unlike some place, say like TAC, it would be that you would not necessarily major in the sciences, because part of the way they're going to determine whether you get accepted or not at medical school is going to be your grades. And I always maintain that people do best in the things they enjoy the most. So I know of kids who majored in chemistry or biology in college because they wanted to go to medical school, and they end up not doing as well as they wanted. They didn't get into medical school, and then they were stuck with a degree they didn't even really like. And so my advice would be, major, if English is your strength, major in English so that you get A's in those classes, and it's going to help your application to med school. Now, you're going to have to do certain prerequisites for medical school. You have to do chemistry, biology, etc. But you can do those. I think the sciences are much more labor intensive in college. They just take up a lot of time. There's lots of labs. And so if you major in the sciences, it's going to take up a lot of time. The humanities classes do not. You don't have labs with philosophy, And so so when you do take those prerequisites, your chemistry, organic chemistry, whatever it might be, you're going to have more time to devote to those really than the people that are majoring in those things, or those that are taking a lot of science classes. So it can actually help you in those prerequisites because you're going to have more time and you're going to be less burnt out by the sciences. You're only taking one class a semester maybe in order to fulfill your prerequisites for medical school. So I would say major, but if chemistry is your love, then major in chemistry. But I think people go into college thinking they have to major in the sciences to get into medical school, and I think that's a big mistake. So I would say major in what you love. I think Olivia had a lot of good ideas in terms of studying. You have to figure out what method works best for you. And if it's walking, then do a lot of walking. One other thing I would add for really hard classes, a good idea is to recopy your notes when you get home that day if you have the time. And I just think frequent reviewing also, so at the end of the week, you're reviewing everything that you studied that week instead of waiting for the test where you're going to cram everything in the day before. So those would be my the bits of advice that I would have in terms of actually getting into school. And then once you're into medical school, it's the same sort of thing. You have to find out what method works best for you. I would also say, if you find studying with other people helps, do it. Make sure you're studying with smart people, so they may be able to help you and give you tips that you wouldn't otherwise, or help you with ideas that you don't understand. So that's about all I have.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all of you for coming and sharing your experience. I'm going to toss it back to you, Mr. Sebastian, to do a couple of the questions in our Q&A pod.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I want to, on behalf of all of our attendees and Susanna, thank you all so much. This was incredible to hear all the words of wisdom. And I know that from looking at the chat box and the Q&A pod, a lot of people's interest has been piqued. I'm going to get through a couple of questions because we have a lot, and I know that this will be good to have a start on some of these topics. So first, a question about discernment, and I'd like to ask this of all the panelists. So how do you not become overwhelmed with all the different options available in the medical and science fields? And specifically, when did you know that you had chosen the right one? I'll ask Mrs. Hansen first.
Oh gosh.
Sorry.
I don't know that I knew. I
Okay.
just went in and, class by class, I really, his advice to take other classes was that's really wise. I always took a literature course, even as a biology major, because I wanted an excuse to have to read a novel, to take a break and to explore other avenues. And then I didn't know when I graduated. So there are a lot of opportunities to go to grad school in the sciences where, I got a teaching assistantship and I was paid to go to grad school so I could keep trying to figure things out. So, and I'm still trying to figure things out. Maybe when I'm done homeschooling, phase 2 of my life will begin. And there's other things I'm called to do in this field. So I think just having an open heart, and if you have the opportunities to keep learning, and I think Rachel said the same thing, I would love to go back to college and learn so much, and not be pigeonholed into one area. So many opportunities out there. So I guess I don't have a great answer for that because I'm still trying to figure it out.
It's helpful to hear even just that experience in and of itself. Mrs. Hultine, how about yourself? Did it ever click for you?
Well, not really. So when I was going through my 4 years of college, I always felt such a pressure to figure it out right away. And I think it was maybe after my second year of college when I was in environmental science, and I was pretty, I knew that I wanted to be in that major. I was very comfortable with my peers and in all of the classes that I had. And it just kind of took the weight off of my shoulders. Like, okay, I know that I want to do something in environmental science. What other careers that, may show themselves eventually? I didn't put too much pressure on myself to figure it out right away. And then I would say once I graduated and I got married, I knew that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I've always known that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And so I had to think to myself, okay, what careers can I do to achieve that and to be a stay-at-home mom? And so that's where teaching for Maj, came in, and I messaged one of my teachers that I had in high school in Maj, and she really helped me out. But as far as, like a pinnacle moment in my college career where it just clicked, I would say it didn't really happen for me. I just kind of had to take the stress off of myself and, let God figure it out for me.
Love that. That's beautiful. Listen to that, students. Mrs. McCarthy, how about for yourself? I know you had a personal connection with that from the start. Did that kind of spur you on throughout your schooling?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question because I remember being in high school and I had so many interests. Actually, before deciding that I was going to go into nursing, I wanted to go into fashion design, and I had applied to different fashion programs. And so yeah, I was very much I loved art history. So that's very different from the sciences. And I think that I know from personal experience, we can get kind of stressed by, wait, I have to make the right decision. I have to make it today, and that keeps us from acting. But St. Joan of Arc has a great quote where she says, act and God will act. And to me, that's always been very comforting because, and also, make a decision. And God will lead you through that, right? Like if you say, okay, I'm going to study nursing, and you continue that relationship with God, he's, going to lead you through that. And let's say you get through your first semester and you say, I don't like this. I do want to do art history. You can switch your major. It's not the end of the road. And even if you get I got my degree in nursing and I'm not doing that right now. I'm teaching. So it's never the end of the story. It's never the end of the story with God. So, stay close to God and let him lead you, I think is what I would say to my younger self.
That's beautiful. I love that St. Joan of Arc quote. That's amazing. Mrs. Montanaro, how about yourself?
Well, like I shared already, I mean, my family goes to TAC. My dad taught there. I was always going to do that. And I didn't regret that. I was happy to do it. And I love philosophy theology. So so I came to this a little bit later, which I think meant maybe that I knew a little bit more, what I was doing. It's hard when you're making that decision for college to know what you want. It's just really hard. It was a slightly more mature decision to pursue this. And I was taking practical things into account. People said, why didn't you go into medical school? Well, medical school is a huge investment. And it's a lot of time and a lot of money. And I know people that did a year and then didn't like it. And then they spent years and years and years paying off that 1 year of medical school. So nursing was a much more accessible career that I knew had a lot of flexibility. So I had some practical reasons to do it. But then, some of it is, as Olivia is saying, you start it, you say, okay, I think this is a reasonable decision for me. If I had started it and just hated it, well, I would have stopped, but I didn't. I loved it. I loved it from the first moment. I knew right away. that it was going to work for me. And now within that field, you know, like I said, I love kids. I want to work with kids. I did pediatrics, but I did start there more generally. I didn't just immediately specialize in one thing. And for me, that was great. So I got to experience a lot of things. It gave me some more options, like I could draw on a more varied background. And then I knew where I wanted to specialize when I went back to school.
That's awesome. Thank you. So for you, Dr. Safranek, specifically, what helped you get through so many of those years of schooling? Because you have your PhD, you have the liberal arts education from up in the Bay Area, and you also have medical school. What was kind of spurring you on to go through all those different areas of education?
I like to learn. I like to study. I've got a lot of interests. I think that's probably what spurred me on. In terms of which direction to head, I've got a few thoughts about this. And one is that, you know, I think the first thing is for students not to be paralyzed, because I know people, even after they've graduated from college, they don't know what they're supposed to do. And my advice always is start doing something, and then it'll be clear whether that's for you. And if it's not, then God's going to lead you in some other direction. So thing to do is just get out and start doing the obvious thing that you should be doing. Father Cornelius Buckley, who some of you know, pointed out, you know, that, you know, when Jesus called his apostles, what were they doing? Well, what they were supposed to be doing, they were fishing, you know, or they were doing the task they were supposed to be doing.
Tax collecting.
So, the tax collecting, and that's what God's going to call you from, you know. And the one other, I mean, a couple other bits of advice on this is, again, you know, maintain a spiritual life and be open to God. Now, one of the books I'd recommend to everybody listening is Walter Chizik's "He Leadeth Me," and he talks about this in here, trying to discern God's will. And one of the points he makes here, and you know, we're probably familiar with this, but so this may not be new, but for the younger people, it might. But you know, two of the fruits of the Holy Spirit are peacefulness of the soul and joy of the heart. And Father Chizik says that, you know, if you turn everything over to God and you pray to him for direction, when you make a decision, if you experience these things, peacefulness of the soul and joy of the heart, then that's probably what God wants you to be doing. And that's what you should be doing. Now, he may lead you on to something else from there, but nevertheless, that's what he wants you to be doing at that time. So what I would do is tell students to go out and start doing something. Now, the one thing I would suggest is you don't run up a lot of debt while you're doing that. So, you know, go to community college, go someplace where you can try different things and not be stuck then, handcuffed to this debt that you're going to be paying off for years. So, you know, you can try these different things, and if God wants you to do it, he's going to find ways of attracting you to it. You're going to be interested in it. Something's going to, you may meet somebody else, a best friend who's doing that, and all of a sudden you become more interested. There'll be some way, or a great teacher, or whatever it is, he'll draw you, but you just have to be open to God's will, and to be able, and to be willing to do, you know, what he wants you to do, whatever direction that might be. So that would be my advice in terms of trying to figure these things out.
That's beautiful. I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. I've got a lot of other very specific questions, and I'll see maybe if we can make put people in contact with our panelists, if that would something that you guys would be comfortable with. But thank you all so much again for your wisdom. I know I speak for myself. I would feel a lot more comfortable if I was discerning right now, hearing your experience in the fields. So let's close with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Our Mother of Divine Grace, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless you all. Have a wonderful weekend, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Just coming up in a week. Talk to you all soon. Bye-bye. Bye, Bradley.